Hi, this is Sam Shumway, AARP Wyoming State Director. We're holding a live Telephone Hall discussion this evening, hosted by AARP Wyoming, with special guest Wyoming Governor Matt Mead. Bob Beck will be moderating our discussion this evening. On behalf of AARP Wyoming, we're glad you can join us. These Teletown Hall calls are interactive, so if at any time during the call you would like to ask a question or add a comment, just press *3, that's *3 on your telephone keypad, to be connected with an AARP staff member who will take your name, question, and place you in line to have your question or comment addressed. Bob, we'll go ahead and turn it over to you now to moderate this discussion.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you, everyone. And again, if you have a question for Governor Matt Mead, just hit *3 on your telephone keypad, and as mentioned, we'll connect you with an AARP staff member who will get your question to us. Governor Mead, first off, thank you so much for joining us once again.
Well, Bob, thank you. I was trying to think, is this our 6th year doing this? And every year you've done it. I thank you. And Sam, congratulations on your new position as state director. You know, AARP in Wyoming has done a magnificent job in my time in office, and has been helpful not only in important to AARP members, but also for my office. And congratulations, Bob. Thanks again for doing this, and we're ready to roll.
All right, Governor, well, why don't we just start off and have you talk a little bit about an interesting year in 2016 for you, and as we look ahead to 2017. 2017 has got to be better than 2016.
Well, I think so. You know, if you look at the decline in revenue that we've seen in 2016, it's been dramatic, and it's been very difficult. Let's go back to the legislative session. As we headed into the last legislative session, I made recommended cuts to the legislature, recognizing that our revenue was not going to be what we anticipated, what Craig anticipated. As you know, we build our budget based upon forecasts for revenue. And so I made recommended cuts to the legislature. Some they took, some they did not take. And then they added to that about $67 million in cuts coming out of the session, which the legislature believed was about the right number. What we saw, though, shortly after the legislative session was a continuing and dramatic decline in revenue projections. And so in May and in June, looking at that and talking to the agencies, I felt that I needed to have additional cuts to our budget. And as a result, in the end of June, I asked and implemented about $250 million more of cuts, which I don't think anybody in the state likes. But you know, one of the things we historically have done well in Wyoming, and it's important to do now, is to make sure that our financial house is in order. And I will tell you, with those cuts, Bob, that I made and the legislature made, as difficult as they were, I believe that our financial house on the operations side of government is in order. My time in office, our rainy day fund has about doubled in size. Our permanent fund has increased over 55%, and that has been helpful. But when you have about 70% of your revenue come from minerals, and natural gas prices are down, coal is down, oil is down, you see the dramatic effect on our state. And so it has been a tough year, but also we see in these last several months things are getting better. We have a new drilling rig that's up. Coal companies are doing better. The supplies of coal that have gone over their historic limits of those who use it, those stockpiles are going down. Natural gas spot prices today were over $3.50. So for those in the industry, they think the worst is past us in our rearview mirror. Things are getting better, but we still have to be conservative in our budget, and we still have some difficult things to work through. On the operations side of government, as I said, I think we're okay till the end of biennium, and I think we'll start the next biennium in better order. The challenge is education, K through 12 education. There's just no other way to put it, and that is a real problem. As you know very well, as we look at 6 years out, if we project 6 years out, you know, we're talking $1 billion plus in the red on that. And so it will be a challenging legislative session, but we do look forward to 2017. We look forward to better mineral prices and better revenue and some brighter spots than we saw in 2016.
Governor, when you look at 2017 and you talk about education, one of the discussions that has come up recently is that we might need to find some more money for education. Can some of our listeners expect a tax discussion to come up?
Well, I don't think there's any question a tax discussion will come up. I think the challenge the state has is now and historically that the legislature has really done I think a very important job in robust education funding, but we just don't have the funds that we did, even 2 years ago, and so changes need to be made. And when you look at a hole that we are facing, you look at the two sides of the equation. What cuts can you take, and what revenue is available? I don't know that on the cut side what will happen this session. I anticipate there will be some cuts. I also anticipate there will be a vigorous discussion on taxes. I would be very surprised if taxes, if anything is done on taxes this session. But I have asked for the legislature to put together a group that engages the entire state of Wyoming on how to address this problem. It's important to hear from our educators on how they think it should be best addressed. It's important to hear from our families, from our parents, and certainly important for the legislature and my office to be engaged in this discussion as well. I'm hoping that group, a task force that is put together, will look at everything, and I think it's everything, including whether it is mill levies, taxes, whatever it may be. All of those are important to consider because we so value education in the state of Wyoming, and we want to make sure we do it the right way.
If you're just joining, go ahead. Well, I was just going to say, if you're just joining us, you're on a call with Governor Mead. This is a live Teletown Hall call with AARP Wyoming. So, Bob, I'll hand it back to you.
Again, hit *3 on your telephone keypad if you want to talk to the governor, and we'll put you through an AARP member. We'll talk about your question and try and get that to the governor here in just a second. Governor, I want to ask you a couple of things before we take some caller questions. One is there any cuts, or do you anticipate cuts coming to aging services, healthcare issues, and senior services that we provide out there? Any concern that we might need to see cuts in those areas?
I think at least from my perspective, Bob, the cuts that we have made, the cuts I had made in June of roughly $250 million, a little less than $250 million. In my mind, those would be the extent of the cuts. I will tell you, and it's hard to know which way the legislature will go. I have certainly spoken to legislative members who think additional cuts are needed. And if additional cuts are needed, you have to look at the largest agencies to get any significant dollar amount, and that's University of Wyoming, community colleges, Department of Correction, and the Department of Health. But I think we have to be very careful in the Department of Health because the cuts that I had already in the Department of Health are $90 million of state general fund, which, because of the matching process, you have to include an additional 40+ million of federal dollars. So it's in excess of $130 million that has already been cut from the Department of Health. And I think to cut deeper in there will be short-sighted in this way, is not only will you fail to provide some of the services that are so important to our citizens, but you also put in jeopardy that we even saw in good times, which is some of our senior centers could be in jeopardy. And it was less than 2 years ago, we had a situation in 2 parts of our state where a senior center was closing down. And I can tell you that when you get the call that a senior center is getting ready to close down, and what should happen with the people who are staying there, those decisions, you can't just bus people somewhere. There's a lot that goes into that. They may be in frail health, and that's where their family may be. And so I think we have to be very cautious about additional cuts in the Department of Health. I think Director Forsland at the Department of Health has done an extraordinary job managing that. But with the cuts that have already been made, it is tough. And the citizens of Wyoming have not felt the full effect of these cuts yet. And to cut further without knowing how it's affecting people, I think would be a mistake in the Department of Health. On the flip side, I have spoken to some legislators who believe that we need to actually add money back into the Department of Health. Where that ends up, I do not know, but at least you see from my budget proposal, I have recommended no additional cuts for the Department of Health that would affect our seniors.
Another area that I think some of our folks might be interested in is in the state retirement system. There have been some rumblings that could be tweaked a little bit. I know people have seen what have happened in other states. Anything significant changing there, do you think?
I have heard some in the legislature talk about that, we need to change what our actuarial projections are. As you recall, we went through that process some time ago, and including that the anticipated rate of return that we were using was 8%, and we lowered that anticipated rate return, and that caused us to have to put some more money in there. What our goal is with regard to that fund is to be 80% actuarially sound, which is not only of those who are already having that retirement, which they earn, but it's also important to these current employees that the state of Wyoming will leave good people in the system and attract good people to the system. They need to know that you will. I do hear some. I've not heard anything yet substantial, and certainly that's not a move that I have made.
Would it be something you'd ever oppose, or would you be, if they did make a change, would you like it to be maybe towards some of the newer employees in the system?
Well, that's, the discussion we had several years ago is defined benefits versus defined contributions. And if you were going to make a change, you'd almost have to have a separate system, because I do think that, while the lawyers may say you can change the system with the people in it, to me, you sort of make a deal when they come on, and everything you can do to live up to that deal is important. And so if there was a change that did take place, I think you would want to look at new starting employees. What sort of retirement system would they be on versus changing the retirement system for those already in it?
It looks like we're getting...
If you have a question for the governor, hit *3 on your telephone keypad, and we're getting some questions. And I understand we have Diane from Meeteetse waiting to talk to the governor. Diane, if you're with us, go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, Governor Mead. I listened to your State of the State address and thought you did an excellent job. I do have a couple of questions. Have we ever taken money from our rainy day fund? If not, why? And what criteria do you use to do that? When is it raining, I guess?
Diane, thank you very much for the question, and it's a very good question, and the question you have is exactly the one that I had in my State of the State last session. When is it a rainy day? When are we going to use those funds, and what are the criteria? And I asked the legislature to make some objective moves on that, so it didn't look like it was just sort of a subjective approach. The legislature did appropriate money from the rainy day fund last year, including $36 million to shore up the budget. So yes, we have taken money from the rainy day fund. I would say, though, it's important to note that currently, even with my proposed budget, there's about $1.6 billion in the rainy day fund. It is still today, I believe, the largest rainy day fund in the country relative to a general fund. It has doubled in size since I have become governor. And as you know from my State of the State, I urge the legislature to use some of that money because I believe it is raining. I believe that smooths out what we are doing in Wyoming, prevents this highs and lows in services. provides predictability to our counties, to our towns, and provides predictability to the citizens of Wyoming so that they know that there's not going to be good times, bad times, good times, bad times, but instead steady times and overall good times rather than these ups and downs. I have, again, and will again encourage the legislature to add some more standards on that so it is known to the citizens of Wyoming when that will be used, how it will be used, and for how long. But the answer to your question is yes, we have dipped into that some, and I suspect there will be movement to look at it again this session. Thank you very much for your good question.
Again, *3 on your telephone keypad if you have a question. Sam, is there anybody else ready to go?
Yeah. From Judy in Cody. Judy, you're live. Judy?
Judy, are you with us? Go ahead.
Judy, are you there? It sounds like it sounds. Okay, Bob. Lost Judy.
Okay. Diane also had texted a second question for us to ask you about that. Should we be looking at Medicaid expansion to bring in more revenue? You addressed this recently during a budget message. Could you talk a little bit about your new thoughts on Medicaid expansion?
Well, yeah, thanks for that, Bob. You know, last year I did all I could to ask the legislature for Medicaid expansion. I asked the year before for Medicaid expansion. It would have brought significant dollars into the state of Wyoming. It would have addressed the needs of roughly 20,000 citizens in the state of Wyoming. Importantly, I think it would have been very important to our small hospitals and healthcare providers in the state of Wyoming. The legislature rejected twice. We had a different point of view on that. The ACA, as you know, commonly called Obamacare, I was not a fan on it. We sued on it, but we lost. We lost every one of those battles, and so I thought it was important under this. You fought that battle, you lost. It was the law of the land, and so my job is what is the best we can do for our Wyoming citizens, our healthcare providers, and our patients. And so I did my best to vigorously ask for that, and I thought it was the right thing to do then, and I still do. The question going into this session, though, is the new administration, President-elect Trump, has said that he's doing away with the ACA, and that encompasses Medicaid expansion. And so having lost the request twice, seeing that President-elect Trump is planning on doing away with the ACA, I didn't see much hope in having a Medicaid expansion discussion despite what I perceived as the benefits when it may be off the table, shortly after the legislature convenes in Wyoming because of the decision making of then President Trump.
If you have a question for the governor, hit *3 on your telephone keypad. You'll be connected with an AARP staff member who will take your name, question, and then place you in line to have your question or comment addressed. Sam, do we have another one there?
We're checking. Yeah, it looks like we've got Pat in Casper. We're going to go live. Pat, you're live. Are you there with a question?
Yeah, I have kids that used to live in New Mexico, and they went to college there. And as long as they lived in New Mexico and were citizens there, their college was pretty much paid for by their lottery. Their lottery goes to education. Why can't part of our lottery go to education?
Pat, thanks for the question. Just a little bit about the lottery. As you may know, Wyoming debated for a number of years whether to have a lottery or not. It passed several years ago, and in the passage of that, the legislature didn't provide any funding for it. They said you got to start from scratch. I appointed a board. That board was able to secure a loan. The first part of the direction that they took is from the lottery. We need to pay off our loan, which they have now done. The law as it is requires a fair portion to go back to local government. Some of it comes to the state of Wyoming. The question, though, is as of now, the amount of money received by the state for the lottery is not a lot of money. I'm sorry I can't give you the dollar figure now, but we're not talking even tens of millions. We're talking less than that. And it's not that it couldn't go to education, but when you're looking at $1 billion plus in a shortfall in education, that will just not be enough to address education. Part of the reason our lottery doesn't make the money that we see in other states is our relatively, well, not relatively, we just have a small population. We just don't buy as many lottery tickets in Wyoming. And so we're not going to see that robust boon that other states see in terms of the lottery dollars. Thank you for your question.
Okay, and Arlene from Cheyenne is ready to go. We'll hear from you. Go ahead.
Governor Mead, what I wanted to know is, like you were saying that we need to have more money, then why does the city of Cheyenne purchase buildings or homes and they stay empty forever? I mean, that's waste. To me, that's wasting money. And also, like welfare. Why can't we get stricter on welfare with people that abuse it?
Darren, thank you for your question. I'm sorry we had some audio feedback here, but the first part of your question on the city of Cheyenne, I'm not prepared to answer that question. I don't know the answers to the city of Cheyenne on the decisions that they have made, and in particular your question on which properties they have purchased. In terms of welfare, we have a specific group in Wyoming that's called MFUCU, which is a Medicaid Control Fraud Unit, and they look at areas where either a patient or a provider is defrauding the system, and they do go after them. So I think there is a mechanism in the state to look at those who abuse the system. I'm not suggesting that we know all of those people, or we necessarily catch all of those people, but that now and before my time has been part of the process in terms of looking at those perhaps who abused our healthcare system. That is not the limit, though. We have other welfare type programs, and all of them we try to make sure we're only providing what is needed to those who are entitled to those. Far from a perfect system, I recognize that, but in all cases where those monies are given out, there's an auditing process, there's the internal review, and there's the external review as well if federal dollars are involved. And so I think that there is an effort, and hopefully we do pretty well compared to our surrounding states and other states as well.
We only have a couple of minutes left. Let's see if we can work Judy in from Sheridan. Judy, you have a question for the governor. Go ahead.
Yes. What can be done about the high cost of prescription medicine?
Judy, that is a great question, and I'll try to give you an answer that is, as I admit, is less than complete. One of the great things about the American healthcare system is, I think in a lot of ways, by the providers, our pharmaceutical companies, we lead the world in advances in medicine. What we do see, and what pharmaceutical companies will tell you, is that part of the reason the cost is so high is the process to get a drug approved by the FDA is very long, very cumbersome, and that the standards are different than they would see in other countries. And so it takes a very long time and a great expense to get a particular drug to market. and as a result, that certainly adds to the cost. I don't want to suggest that's all of it, though. We have seen, and it's been in the news in the last several months, companies that, in my mind, apparently without justification, raise the price of a certain medicine here or a certain medicine there, an extreme amount that looks like it is just directly related to the company wanting to make more profit. I suspect that that is also an attribute of why some of our medicines are so expensive. And then you get into specialty medicines, whether it's for cancer or something else, and you hear what a particular one tablet costs, and it is very, very expensive. I don't know if I can't provide you the answer on what the cure is for that, but I do know the FDA costs are expensive, and then the profits that some companies feel they need to take certainly adds to that as well. Generics help in that some way, but you can't get generics until after X amount of years that the original company had the product in place, and so even generics can be very expensive as well.
Governor, I know you're pressed for time. Let me ask one last question from Dave in Saratoga for him, and this should be a short one for you. Will you use the rainy day account to fund education?
I think that's an open question, Bob. I think that I'm reluctant to do that out of the box because you could blow through the entire rainy day fund in short order and leave nothing for the Department of Health, Family Services, Department of Transportation. So to me, that would be a Band-Aid, and a short-term Band-Aid that would cause other problems. That may be a short-term solution that some would look at, but for me, I don't think that is the answer to education. It would just last as sort of a one-time. I think we need to take a broader look at a long-term solution that looks at efficiencies, making sure we're not overspending, and making sure that we have the revenue sources that will provide a long-term solution.
Governor, I know you've got to run. We always appreciate your valuable time, and thank you for coming on and joining us once again.
Bob, thank you, and thanks AARP. This is always an important time. I very much appreciate questions, as always, and I thank our seniors. I note that our senior population now it's about 85,000. It's projected to be over 138,000 by 2030, over 1/5 of our citizens. And so a very important group for me to have the opportunity and privilege to visit with. And I thank you and AARP and Sam for making this opportunity for me.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Governor Mead, and I'm one of those people adding to those numbers, so thank you for taking care of me as well.
Thank you very much.
Governor,
Thank you,
again, big thank you on behalf of
Sam.
AARP. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.